highlight of the evening. Samantha and your posse, come on up here. So we have Samantha, Wolfe, and Tracy, Nick, and Anthony are going to take a deep dive. They're all on the front lines of immersive technology and branding, and thank you all for coming.
I have to be on brand.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Sam. I know some of you, but not all of you. I wrote the AR advertising chapter in Charlie's book, so my picture's in there somewhere in the back. I think of chapter 24. But so I focus on marketing, advertising, branding when it comes to VR and AR. I have a company called We Are Phase 2, which works with emerging tech companies to be able to market and brand what they do, and also with companies that want to integrate emerging tech into their campaigns. So last year, I said to DJ, let's do a marketing-focused one of New York VR. He listened, and then he asked me back. So hopefully we'll live up to the standard of last year. Just to get a sense before we dive in, how many of you in the room are developers? How many of you are from something related to marketing? Oh, wow. I didn't expect that many marketers. Okay, excellent. That's so cool. Okay, so I've introduced myself. Now I want to go through the panel and have them each introduce themselves as well. So, Tracy?
Hi, my name is Tracy Quitasol. Am I on?
No, not quite.
Can you hear me now?
We can't hear Tracy quite yet.
No,
Does it work?
There's always a technical
Anthony, why don't you go and then...
Sure. Can you guys hear me clearly? Hi, my name is Anthony Flores. I am the CMO of Disrupted and also the co-founder of Chapter 1 Creative, an AR and VR consulting agency.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicholas Bondora. I'm an experience strategist at Octagon, which is a sports and entertainment marketing company. There, I run on the innovation team as an experience strategist, just being part of the full life cycle of a project. All points of tech, AR, VR, everything.
Okay, Can you hear me now? Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, I'm Tracy Quitasol. I'm the head of innovation for OMD North America. We lead our teams and our groups to think about where those emerging platforms are and where the signals are that consumers are headed. And we try to bring some of these new test and learns to our clients.
Great. So, let's see. So today we're probably going to flip a little bit between, I do this sort of naturally, but just to at least warning, between the idea of marketing for AR and VR and marketing with AR and VR. The panel is heavy of marketing with AR and VR because we have 3 people who've all worked on the sort of agency side of things. So first, Tracy, you say innovation. Can you explain what an innovation team is and its role within an agency, and why do brands like trends and innovative technologies? Just an easy one there.
And this is a layup. We have this thing where if you ask 4 people what innovation is, you will get 5 answers at an agency and with clients as well. So we really look at it as a product, and as part of one of the pillars and how we define that product, it's really about bringing test and learns to our advertisers. One, they want to know where consumers are headed, but secondly, they really focus on wanting to look innovative to both consumers and within the community. So last week at South by, it's like the Olympics for all brands and media agencies. And really, they think a little bit about that from a B2B perspective, but mostly understanding where consumers are headed and what they're going to be doing next.
And so why is it so important to consumers, do you think?
For consumers, it's because everyone's power is both within their car dashboard, which is the smartest device they own, and their phone. And connected between all of that is also the home. So for consumers, their life is in their phone, their home, and their car now. And so anything that's going to make their life easier or understand how they use technology will impact how our brands want to seed themselves into that space. kind
Nicholas, yes, no, Nicholas, so you work in experiential. If you can define that for people who might not know, and then I guess why companies like experiential marketing in general.
Sure. So experiential marketing, the very simple answer obviously is, so print advertising deals with print, digital marketing deals with digital, experiential marketing deals with experiential. It's experiences, it's activities. It's more interactive, I would say, because it's someone taking part in something. I think the deeper answer is that there's a different sentiment to experiential marketing. There's a greater sense of, as a brand, we built this for you to take part in. So it's not so much being spoken to, it's more you interacting with the brand and in a conversation rather than listening to someone's advertising. And I think it's important to do that because it humanizes the brand in a way, and also doesn't come off as salesy if I'm taking part in it. So I think that's why it's important for brands.
Yep. And so Anthony, you're one of the few people like me who've worked on both with brands to use the technology and with the technology to be able to market, the sort of with and for. What have you found that's different from either way, or has there been something that's different?
I think the main difference is how brands look specifically at where they're going to use AR and VR to engage the consumer. And when you're working on the agency side, sometimes their focus becomes on specific activations, but not necessarily the long-term strategy of where AR and VR would come in. I've worked with agencies like both of theirs on specific stuff where it's about engaging a consumer at a specific time and place. And when you're looking at from the brand standpoint, it's like, where does this fit in our general roadmap over 2 to 3 or 3 to 5 years, not just one specific occasion or one specific campaign.
Right. So generally, for me, it ends up being what I've heard from one of my partners who works in agency said, usually if you talk to a brand about new technology, they might sort of glaze over a little bit. And if you talk to people who are in emerging tech about marketing, their eyes glaze over. That's sort of like, it's either way. And I've managed to put myself in between both of those eye glaze kind of things. So this is sort of for any of you. Run me through a little bit of your creative process when including AR and VR into campaign. When does it come up? When should it come up? I don't know who wants to take it. Do you go ahead, Nicholas? I see your eyebrows. Yeah.
So as far as when it comes up, I would say on our innovation team, we get approached by a brand with either a tech objective, so they say we want to integrate tech somehow, or just a business problem, saying we want to allow people to do X in a 50 square foot space, which is impossible. So as far as when it comes up, it's either a matter of really trying to connect the brand with innovation and technology, and really pushing how people see the brand, making it more forward-thinking. But also sometimes it's a matter of necessity. So if a brand needs to integrate technology, either to improve their processes with an on-site activation or just give people the ability to do something they couldn't otherwise do, that's when that comes into play. As far as the process of developing it, we go back to brands with a couple ideas based on just some past experiences and our knowledge of the brand itself. One of our personal processes is we usually give 3 to 4 ideas and then a 4th or 5th that's the crazy one, and we set it up that way. And that's how we really know that a brand trusts us, is if they listen to the crazy one and the eyes don't glaze over. And those are usually the most fun to work on, so we always try to hit those. I think that covers the question.
And what about you? When does that come in?
You know, it's interesting. I'd echo some of those things. So what happens with us is our brands are just a full spectrum of brands. So for example, if Frito is to come to us, which they have dozens of different chips within that segmentation, sometimes they'll say, we want a big idea. Can you include a really cool piece of technology? And I said, well, I kind of need a little more to work from with that. But what they ask us to do is explore what's going on out there. Now, it will have been our job to help constantly be seeding this within there. So we try to provide them with information, usually like anything we can do to help, and I'm not saying this in in a way, but like as long as we're always bringing them, oh, you should know about this, or we've heard this, or here's some patterns we're seeing out there and signals, they'll then latch on to something we bring to them. The other thing is every one of our we need a big idea includes a moonshot. So we literally call it that. And it can be as wacky and crazy as we want it to be, but they've grown to accept that from our group. It shows them that we're thinking way out there, and it can come back a little bit. But also this notion that you have to be out there because it's headed that way in the next 3 to 5 years.
Right.
So we tend to operate a lot with our, well, I should say there's a spectrum of advertisers or clients that we have, so that some, like the moonshots, sometimes we put one out there so they can kill it, right? So we'll just come up with something and give them a kill, or something that they can mash up that works better within their system. Because we're kind of meeting them halfway so long as they want to test and learn.
I'm going to echo that real quick. Yeah, I think that for some of our brands, we try to emphasize that to keep pace is really falling behind. I think sometimes a brand says, we saw this, can we replicate that? And we're like, well, that's already been done. Like you're literally giving us an example of that being done. So yeah, we try to include, moonshot's a great word for that. Just trying to tell brands that sometimes not taking a risk is the risk. So not to play it safe, basically.
Anything else? Or no, are you good?
No, no.
Okay. So one of the things that I've heard a lot of times, at least within the AR, VR community, is they decided that they're going to spend their money on this other emerging tech. So how do you end up evaluating sort of an AR, VR versus other emerging tech? Like what, if, again, bias towards the room, loving AR and VR, like how do you say, well, AR and VR is going to be right for this brand or right for this activation? Like when do you sort of know, and when do you say, you know what, it's just, it's not the right time?
I think you have to, for every brand, just like with any campaign, it's going to be different and it's going to be circumstantial. And depending on what the scale of the project is also will determine some of those factors. I think the thinking about the process begins in the very beginning and really being honest onto where is the AR or the VR going to provide the most value. And sometimes that's different depending on, in a marketing campaign, where in the communication cycle that is. If this is about drawing awareness to something where people have little information about, is this about adding information where people have a starting point but need a deeper dive? Or is this about adding some sort of element that either through traditional mediums can't be communicated or, more importantly, experienced in that way? And you've got to be really honest, I think, with the marketing managers and the marketing team about where in the process that makes sense. And I don't think that there's a cookie cutter approach to it. I think it is very much a case-by-case situation.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that like throughput's an issue for an event, right? I mean, I think anybody who goes to even, I mean, we had a line to try something. I mean, it was a line to have Charlie sign, but same sort of idea. If you go to any sort of VR event, you're going to be, I had a thing at South by, there was like, you're 100th on the list. It's like, really? I'm never going to see it. So I imagine if you're going to have a big scale activation, that you have to go, how many people can we really get through? Whereas AR's is about the downloading, right? I mean, does that speak?
Yeah, so throughput's a big conversation we have to have a lot. I think coming out of activations even 5 years ago, the clients are always like, throughput, how many people can we get per minute? And I think with AR, VR, mixed reality, I think the length of time someone spends in it, knowing that these technologies are so good at storytelling, the length of time is proportionate to the amount of storytelling you can do. And we try to get that across to brands, is that the more time they can spend doing something, the more they can take away from it and tell other people about. So the other problem with that is if we try to get them in and out in 30 seconds, it's forgettable. So I think it's a matter of course, a balance, but we want to put people in these realities for as long as possible, just so they can really experience it.
Now, in terms of, I mean, I talked to one person in an agency, neither of you, who said, if I have to download AR, I'm not going to give it to my client. Is that still true? Not true? You're smiling at that, Tracy.
We were early adopters with Blipper many moons ago. So to give you an idea, I would say that most of our brands were really open to that notion of download in general. I just think so long as we show the smoothest path to that, so there's no hiccups, it's still acceptable. But we've been really big advocates for the notion that your phone will be able to do this for you with just image recognition. And so we've been promoting that for some time now, because we do trends every year, and we say that this year, I'm the one who's always saying, and I swear to you, this is the year. And they're so sick of me coming in every year to
What are
talk
the
about
trends?
trends.
I mean, it's like, that's what I think it was Tony Parisi from Unity said, he's like, I'm not going to follow any more like marketing trend forecasts. I mean, how do you even do that? I'm sorry, I'm getting like off script with that, but how do you end up anticipating sort of what is the future with this?
We always say we don't have a crystal ball. I don't know about you guys, but we tend to work with trends. We listen for a lot of signals on the horizon. When we see a couple more signals, we start gaining patterns. From those patterns, we usually do a triple check into the total market size, the same thing you guys do to your startup companies. And then we power that with just the intelligence we have from the data we have about consumers. So we always add a layer on, will consumers do this? And just when we pitch ideas for AR and VR, we always get that question back to us. We're in a room, we've got a CMO on Thursday coming in, and she's gonna say, yeah, but what consumer is gonna do blank? So we have to be able to say, it's 2 clicks, I promise, and we'll be able to get great throughput with it. I mean, I think that that's what we're trying to get at when we do it, when
Now,
promote those things.
we were talking a little bit before, and you said that you just always, you know the kinds of questions that you're going to be asked by brands. Are there any ones that just come up over and over and over and over again, besides just like how many people are going to get through this? Like, are there any ones that could help the room sort of prep before they go to their either pitch their CMO, we need to do this, or to
I think
a
when you're
brand?
talking to a CMO about this, what happens is people are looking, innovation is a risk. And all lead executives are really just trying to make obvious what the risks are so that they can mitigate them before they can invest in them. So what you're trying to show with any concept that you have is the immediate value that it can present and have a clear place on where it will affect the business. Now, if it's something that's entertainment based and you feel like there'll be heavy engagement at an on-site activation, talk about things like throughput and how many people will be in there. If it's someplace else in the sales cycle, you've got to really understand the brand and your customer. You know, for brands like Nike and Adidas, who in the last 6 months have had numerous releases,
Over and over and
have
over again.
leveraged AR through Snapchat, or Nike has released their own app, the sneakers app, with a lot of AR releases on there. They have an understanding that they have a hyper fan that, if communicated to 30 days prior to a release, will download that app and anticipate that AR activation to happen.
Like they'll just have if you can, because you think initially, you said Snap's a client, so I'll try to be nice. But initially when you're like, oh, it's a filter, that's it. But I think that some of what Nike and Adidas have done is shown how much more it can be.
Absolutely.
If it's sort of supplementing and augmenting, augmented reality, but like augmenting an actual event activation, like how creative you can be with sort of a theoretically a simple.
Yeah, so instead of having a single place where an event takes place, they've geo-fenced an area, and now that interactivity and that experience happens in an area as opposed to one specific place. So yeah, depending on when you're trying to sell through to the CMO, you've got to just know where you fit in and where you can provide value under that circumstance.
Yeah, often when I end up talking with companies in the space, I'm like, it ends up being probably you or any of you guys, that I'm like, you have to understand, they hear these pitches all day long. If you go up and you be like, have you heard of augmented reality? They'll be like, oh my God, get this person out of my room. But you go like, what is the differentiating factor? What is the thing that you have in particular that is going to sort of prick up your ears to go like, wait, I haven't heard that before. That does something a little different. I can then, from an agency standpoint, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you can sort of like sell that in. You go, we found a company that does this thing differently than any other company out there, and that works for your brand because of.
So I'm glad you said the word cookie cutter earlier, because that's a thing we think about a lot, in that we don't want to apply a solution to a brand problem or question with a cookie cutter solution, because the brand might love it. They might say, oh, we want to do that for us. We want to replicate exactly what some other client did and for us. And that would be great if that project comes through. But the problem is that, like with lead times of projects and development times, you end up spending 6 months on something you can't really say was unique. So it all comes back down to selling a unique proposition using technology that's not a cookie cutter example of something. And then at the end of it, when you do your post-mortem, you say, we did something no one's ever done before.
Right.
Otherwise, you spend years not doing it.
Well, that's what we're sort of in this interesting, I mean, this is why our company started, is because from the developer point of view, they've worked on something for 6 months to a year that they're like, now we can monetize it. We can sell it to everyone. Whereas you on the other side are going like, I just want the one. I want the one, and then you can do it for somebody else. So you might get the one client, and then after the one client, you know, it might go a few more times, but then you have to be developing the next thing, especially if you want to work with a major brand. At least that's my hypothesis with it. I don't know if.
I think, for the people in the room, if you address the need more than the specific idea, you'll find that you'll be a lot more agile. One group that was on stage earlier has built a really agile system, the team over at Kabak. And I think, this will be a breakout year for companies like them who've built things that can be developed and consumed on multiple platforms. At the end of the day, every brand has different initiatives. Some have a social initiative, some have a community initiative, some have an engagement, some have a e-commerce one. So you need to be able to either develop a tool that specifically addresses one of those things or is agile enough to fit into a longer plan where maybe there's a touch point of all of those things.
Right.
So, yeah, I wanted to actually echo some of these thoughts. So we'll have some brands that will come to us and say, please show me the most innovative thing that you have. Can you just give us a list of those cool startups? And we just want to know about them. And then we have to protect you from going down that rabbit hole with them, quite honestly.
That's what you were talking about before.
It's really important that we want them to test and learn with you. What we don't want is anyone to waste anybody's time. We are all mentors in the startup space, so we're hugely protective of your time. So we really we walk that tightrope with you, and we say, here they are, but before you reach out to them, we want to have a better understanding of your need, what you're trying to achieve. If it's just something splashy, we're good with that, but then it has to be quid pro quo. Like, because we control the media budgets, if you're going to do something with a startup, what are the promotions that you will put against it with media and marketing money that will support what we're going to do? Even if it's a small activation. Some of our best work has been to a really small work that's won Emmys, right? So there's a balance there. On the other hand, sometimes we'll say, okay, it's cookie cutter. You really should just go straight to the media group, and they can work it out with you, and they're really smart people, and they can figure it out. My caveat.
Media group, just for the people, what the media group is versus you.
So we're a tiny little group that tries to peer around corners. They're the folks that are working with the bigger platforms. If you think that your idea can, it's just more cookie cutter, or you've done it with one or two brands and you can scale it up for a Pepsi or a Frito or a Hasbro, they're the ones to do that with because they can help you get there. They will also ask you to measure differently against what we will ask you to measure differently. So sometimes the doorway in through the innovation team will help you do some of that iterative work before we scale it up. And we were, like our group, for example, we were some of the first partners with Uber before they were big, with Airbnb, with Flipboard, with Pinterest, when they were tiny little companies. They worked with us then, they probably would, it's pretty tricky to get in now. So I would say like we walk that tightrope with you to ensure that no one's wasting anybody's time.
Right. No, my partners and I end up talking about technology with purpose and technology with value, not necessarily technology for technology's sake, because you sort of have to think through that. So you hinted to measurement. What are the kinds of things that maybe are of value to you when you measure versus, you know, sort of the slightly more evolved, I'm not going to say cookie cutter, although that's what I mean, versions of it? Like, how do they, what is success when it comes to working with these technology for, I guess, for you and for your client?
That's a great question, because I think it actually depends on what the needs are. If it's a small activation, so long as we get as many people through there as possible, and that there's results as the client has defined it. So we usually set that up with you in the beginning. Here's how we're measuring success. How quickly can we get there? On the other hand, the media team is asking me, what are the social impressions? Did we move any product? All the different things that you have from a regular media measurement, we try to kind of bridge that gap. I mean, I don't know what you guys see, but it really depends on what the project is, where the client is.
I think, just to jump on that, I think you're absolutely correct. It's a case-by-case scenario, and I think it's important for people in the room just to get a familiarity when, if you're thinking about pitching ideas to brands, understanding, are you in an e-commerce sales cycle where people are thinking about dwell times and conversions? Are you going to be on an on-site activation where it's about throughput and sentiment? Or probably sentiment is probably the main thing that goes across. At the end of the day, whatever the experience and however it's consumed, it has to provide value to the end consumer. So if you check that box, I think that's the only sort of general box. But depending on where it is, if it's at retail, you're going to be looking at, you know, is it time spent drawing attention to something? Is it something that moves some sort of POS in a more efficient way? Really understanding
You have to define POS.
Point of sales. You know, there's a lot of time now, especially when it comes to retail, where AR and mixed reality will be able to enhance POS, where brands can present either a sales platform or a narrative on site at a location, and these things can be augmented with information or products or, you know, holograms of the owners coming to life. So yeah, understanding that process will help you understand where your technology fits in and the best way to sell it through.
So are there, oh, go ahead.
No, I think coming from mostly the experiential, and again, we're definitely moving, like I said, more from throughput to dwell time. And I think another, of course, every event kind of hinges on lead generation, some kind of registration component. But what we kind of a immeasurable metric we consider now is what we call the spectacle. Because some of our activations we've done recently, it's as entertaining to watch as it is to partake in. Again, not really something you can measure other than with dwell time, but a lot of our project goals are now increasing that spectacle, because that really has a multiplicative effect on people either walking by or people later on telling stories about what they did that day.
Yeah, and you know, to echo that, one of the things that we see is if you think about, when you think about anything, whether it's Pokemon or other things that have taken place, it starts as a game, right? Any big technology starts as this kind of fun game, the filters on Snap, Pokemon. And so the more people that can be excited about something that's really cool about it, that actually matters, I think, to marketers, because that comes back immeasurably in terms of social surprise, sharing, and the fact that they may have gotten press out of it, which is South by is pretty much that, the Olympics of,
yeah, I mean,
you know, from an experiential or any other element. The other thing I think that's kind of interesting too is you had said something about retail, and we keep hearing, for me, it doesn't matter which product I work on, and I work across a ton of different products every day. It's about the merging of physical and digital at retail. I think that many people are looking for some kind of magic to happen in aisle. I'm gonna take a picture of my Doritos, and here's what might happen. Or I'm gonna go, so I think that ultimately translates to commerce, but in the end, the magic in the aisle is also what they're looking for, regardless of what product it is. Almost, I mean, universally, that's the case for almost all of the products I work on.
Zapar I mean, they were just listed as a top 10 innovative company in Fast Company, and that's what they've been pushing and pushing. And then, I'm going to have them at the Augmented World Expo to talk about marketing too. So I'm excited. So how do you know if it's going to be a good or innovative VR or AR experience? And is there anyone that you are proud of that you worked on, and why?
There's a lot that I'm definitely very proud of. I think to answer the first part of your question, the only way to know if it's a success, is to test it. There's nothing that's going to give you an idea of whether or not something is effective unless you can take some sort of control group and put it in front of them and let whoever the end consumer or the end target audience is consume it. There is no, as good of as a marketer or as many people you have in a room, it's going to be very hard to predict that. What's a recent one?
You've worked on a lot. I mean, you've all worked on like so many brands that are, I mean, the list could go on and on and on. But even if you just can highlight a couple that were fun from this perspective.
I worked with a small brand recently called Mr. Steak. And this is a small brand that I worked with my former company NexTechAR, but we were able to create a hologram that went directly off of the website. You click onto the website, you look at any of the products that are on the website, you click onto one of the grills, no need for an app, and directly onto that, a hologram, a volumetric hologram of the owner gives you a spiel about his steak and his grills. And most recently, he took a trip to the Mediterranean, meeting different chefs and introducing his app to the famous chefs that he was going around. And this was someone who a year ago was probably the last person who I thought would be a advocate for AR and the future of AR, but is now traveling around the world. So a personal victory, I think, for turning the boat on one, but also one that I think shows a bit of the future of where it's going, where not all AR experiences are going to be mobile AR experiences that come from an app. You know, mobile commerce comes in many shapes, and there's room for AR and XR in them in a lot of different places. So more things like that I think you'll see in the upcoming year.
Any favorites? If there's not one personally that if there's one that you've done that you really like from a branded content standpoint.
Yeah, sure. So personal favorite came from what I said earlier about the necessity of the technology, just to make an idea come to life, to happen. So we were approached by MasterCard, and they said to us, we want to allow people to golf in an airport. And we said, all right, well, just build a putt-putt course. They said, well, we can't bring in golf clubs, golf balls, obstacles. It's an airport. So we said, okay, well, how can we do this with technology? And they said, well, we have a 10 by 15 foot footprint. So the things kept piling on. So we said, all right, well, let's build kind of this mixed reality experience using Vive. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir on a lot of this. Using the Vive, we will drop in multiple golf courses for people to choose from. We'll have these amazing effects.
You productize this and sell it, because I know a lot of people that would actually want to buy that.
I'm sure. And we dropped it in airport footprints, and it was awesome, and it created that spectacle effect where you suddenly, more so than a line of people waiting for their turn, you get a crowd of people cheering someone on. So that's been a personal favorite. Like you said earlier about the physical hybrid, talking more about the experiential space. We work with Allstate to build a VR experience into an actual motorcycle. So we had a platform built that, of course, didn't let you move the motorcycle. But we integrated, again, the Vive, some motion detection software to basically when you turn the wheel, it turns the bike in the VR experience. So we transport you to California when you're really in, North Dakota or you're in Florida. So I think the physical digital hybrid, and we've been trying to come up with a good word for that, but there isn't really digital.
That's what yeah. I need to get branding people working on this.
Yes. I think those are really the unique ones, because at the end of those, you can say, truly, we did something someone hasn't done before, and we did it because someone else can't do it for whatever reason.
Right.
So those obviously have a longer timeline, but those are the ones that mean the most in the end, really.
We had one, I like it just because it was challenging. So we have a client, Cigna Insurance, and they know that most people don't like to get their checkups. So what we did with them is they said, how can you gamify the checkup? I'm just letting you know, it was a challenge. And so we said, that's interesting. So we saw this one picture of a museum in Dubai where they had done this whole health, it was a whole health AR, MR, XR, anything you wanted. I thought, oh, that's a cool picture. We were doing a trends presentation and we showed them the picture and they said, that's what we want. I'm like, okay, this is awesome. We'll figure it out. So we tried to contact the company that had built this and they said that took 2 years. I'm like, no, we have 6 months. So
That never happens in an agency, ever.
so we said, okay, so we kind of duct tape and baling wire. Someone said duct tape and bubble gum earlier. I'm from the Midwest. Baling wire, you know, you tie the hay around it. So we then built a ball, a customized ball, so that you could measure blood pressure, no, your pulse. We had them get their weight and their blood pressure right outside. So throughput was really slow. Thank you. But then they took this game and they put on a HoloLens and they had to capture these 4 things to understand what their biometrics were and why it was important to get these 4 things. We did it at Disney. We had a whole booth at Disney that we did it. We got a lot of people through, but we need to get more people through, and they loved the experience. But the challenge was you have all of these people around, and how can you get them even to think about a checkup, right? They're there for the marathon, they're there to have fun. They are certainly not there to think about their health like a checkup. So we were super happy with that one. It was challenging, to say the least, because to some extent, I want to go back to what you said originally. Sometimes clients might just say, I want cool tech. And they kept saying, no, but we keep hearing about VR, we want VR. But we said, well, we think the HoloLens glasses will work better and it's going to be faster for us. We're just going to be able to get more people through. So you often have to convince them why you want that technology, even though they've kind of bought into the idea. And you might find yourself doing that a couple times because you have to get buy-in from every segment, the marketing, the people that are writing the checks, the people that are going to help you move the product. And so that often takes longer, and we want to just start developing. So I found like the Cigna one was cool because they take a lot of risks with us, even though they might not sound like insurance might not sound, oh, will they take risks? These guys will take risks on really cool things with us, but they ask us to explain exactly why, what, and sometimes the numbers aren't so important, but there's other measurables that they're trying to get in. Yeah. But that was my favorite project.
Yeah, no, and MasterCard, I always end up watching MasterCard as like, what are they doing now? Because they do seem to push. So now I have to watch Cigna too, in my 500 companies that I'm already watching. But it's, so one of the questions that's been coming up a lot, so it used to be that companies would say, I have to explain VR and AR before I even pitch. Like I have to say, this is what it is. And so I actually asked a couple social media, put in a couple social media posts, and it looks like people are having to do that a little bit less. Is that, are you finding that? Is that the case with you as well? That people are sort of like, okay, I sort of get what that is, but then maybe it's now the actual specific execution.
Yeah, I think the general definition of AR and VR is becoming more prevalent, and people are running into it organically more. And now people have experienced a couple of types of AR or VR themselves, and now they're asking specifically on what type of AR, you know, whether it's trigger-based, location-based, and things like that. So I think the questions are starting to become a little more acute.
Right. And then how much emphasis when you end up promoting? So you've worked on a campaign. How much emphasis are you on promoting it to consumers? I would imagine are a lot of what you're focusing on, that the VR and AR is involved. Is that I think that people tend to assume that's sort of the first message out there, when in fact it's probably a larger message, about like come and play golf, but you don't necessarily say play golf using this technology.
I'm very glad you said that. So I think the conversations about what is VR AR are being replaced by why is this better than that one time I tried it. I think for some reason people, and it might just depend on the type of person, some people are very eager to write it off as if like it's a fad, we'll see it, something else replace it in 2 years. So I think it's just really replaced the conversation with needing to prove why it's better than what could previously have been done. And I think what you said is perfect. It's more about giving someone the superpower than telling them, here's the cape. You know what I mean? So I think that's a great way to approach it.
Okay. And then, let's see. I guess this ends up hitting, I think you already answered that particular question. So what do you think are the opportunities for potentially developer? Like, how do you guys end up working? Do you end up working primarily with in-house teams, or do you end up having people come and pitch to you? Like, how does that tend to flow with your different companies?
I guess I'm between them, so I'll start. I work a lot with innovation teams, and then oftentimes I will work with a larger agency that's managing a brand or a campaign, and somewhere in the middle we'll identify somebody in the room or a few people in the room for the execution.
So you end up coming up with the ideas in-house more than you end up having somebody from outside, I can do this cool thing, or how does that end up sort of balancing?
I think for me, it's the chicken or the egg.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll find a cool innovation and I'll see a great product fit because I know of a company with an existing issue. And sometimes brands will come out with an RFP and they'll say, hey, I'm looking for this.
Find RFP.
It's a request for a proposal. So a brand will say, hey, I've got X to do here. I will send it out to my network and they'll say, who's got the best idea? Sort of like a cold call, and all of their partnering agencies will take their best foot forward without making a financial commitment to say, this is a direction we can move you towards.
Yeah, and I would actually, so my agency often issues RFPs, but what happens is they come to us first, the innovation team, to say, what should we be looking at? What should we put in this RFP? And then I'll say, oh, I think I have a really cool, I met with this vendor once who can do X. Let me put that in front of you first because I think this could be the yardstick by which we might issue the RFP. I think it's, the RFP, it forces the brand, both my internal customer and my external customer, to really focus on what they're asking you for. Now, I think that an RFP is both good and bad, right? So you get very specific directives, you get, you know what they're measuring against. You can also do your own moonshots in there. But sometimes I think, oh, get ahead of the RFP, so I want to get a little up in front of it so that I'm able to provide influence to what they're going to decide for what's going to be millions of dollars of media put against something. If I can scrape some of that money for innovation, that's what I'm always trying to do. I'm always scrapping for something. And it's tin cup, but it's a little bit like, you need to be doing this. I need you to allocate 10% to X.
Yeah, I used to say that when I had like a $10 million budget, like $9.5 million was to we will definitely get a result from this. And then the 500,000 was, I don't know, just so that you can try and do something new and different. And I think, is it true that sort of in that, if we had a $10 million budget, is it still that VR is part of that 500,000, or are they moving towards the main budget now? What do you think? Fingers crossed. But
I think it depends on the brand. I'm seeing a lot of the brands that we've worked together with open that up to I think they've made the commitment that at some point VR and XR are going to be part of the mix, and now they've just got to figure out which brand and in which part of the communication and engagement cycle that happens, but they know it's a destination.
Right.
And for me, I'm talking 3 to 5 year calendars on a large strategic. On any given day, a great idea could land on the table just for a satellite execution at South by or something like that. But I think I'm seeing a lot of the larger national brands now on a longer term saying, this is going to be a part of our budget.
AR can work for anything. I mean, that's just sort of, it's a little bit of, in Charlie writing the book, I mean, it could be anything. And then VR tends to be for more specific use cases. Any other comments before we open it up to the room?
I just think I want to iterate for the people in the room who have products that they think would be of value either to marketers, brands, or agencies to just identify in your value prop where you think you can affect the business. If it's simply like I can affect sales, I can affect engagement, I can affect just people being on your website longer, that very simple answer moves you from one room to another room. And that is often the answer where it just gets gray. Well, it could do this if you wanted to do that, or it could affect this, but for your specific company, have a very specific answer for that, and you'll find that you'll be able to move through the bureaucracy faster.
Yeah, it tends to be for me, it's the what can you do uniquely and differently that nobody else can that is going to help sort of the person that you're pitching to. Not help you, not say, isn't this really cool, but what does it do for them? Why do they need to use your company and your technology more than anyone else? And whether you're pitching the brand decision maker, whether you're pitching an agency, whether you're pitching a distributor, no matter what, it's sort of what's in it for them. Any other? Okay. Any questions for? DJ has a microphone. Oh, there's one over there. Oh, and one here too.
Traditionally, advertising agencies were charged with branding and creating a need in the consumer for the product. How do you see yourselves as disruptors, cooperators? How do you fit into the entire advertising picture?
Wow, do you have time for a drink? I mean, that could take a long time. I'll just tell you my group, I'm in a media agency. Our holding company has over 200 agencies that run the spectrum of branding, commerce, tech, all sorts of different agencies. I don't even know all of them. I have to pull out this book that I kind of have to flip through. And I think what our little group inside of this big agency, our job is to distribute innovative thinking across all of our brands. So when you bring cool stuff to us, if we think it's really cool, we'll say, you know what, let's do a speaker series. Let's distribute that so all these big brands are at least aware of this so that we're thinking out a year, 2 years. Is that something that can impact our communication and branding? I always worry about being a disruptor, right? Because I firmly believe, like, the more I can get people thinking the way we do and thinking about moonshots and thinking about the possibilities and thinking about testing and learning, the more I can get them to meet me halfway so that I'm not constantly having to sell in this notion. If they understand it more, you have more advocates within the agency. So we're kind of, we have an internal customer, and I always focus on how can I help them know the most so they can be as mostly innovative for our external customer. So I don't know if that answers your question. That's my perspective, but I'm a tiny little group in this big sea of people.
You're more important than you realize.
It's a,
For me, I mean, I did about 20 years in television, then switched into VR and AR. And when I did that, I was surprised that VR and AR was treated any differently than any other media out there. And so I think it's not yet there, but it will be. And so it's just like there can be people who focus and know the best practices from a TV standpoint, from a radio, from a print, from a experiential is very broad, but that it just is sort of another media that you can use and engage, and it just happens to be one that is still sort of new now, and people are still trying to understand it. That help a little? We can check more.
I mean, just a little, I'm certain. And by the way, I feel like I'm so new at the agency. I've been there this is my 5th year. I too wonder, like, where do we fit into the whole ecosystem? But that's kind of the fun of it, because we can define that, you know? I mean, that's why every day. Look, everyone's always scrapping for, you know, it's tin cup, right? Can I have X for Y? But if we tell our story the right way, then we get advocates on the side. So I have certain internal clients, they get that I'm gonna come with something cool. They say, what's the risk? What's the payoff? And sure, let's give it a shot. So I don't fight for budget. I mean, obviously everyone fights for budget, but I feel like I want them to have a lot of heart for it, because it's not always gonna be an easy row to hoe when we're having to build something in a tightened time frame that has to reach a lot of consumers. So I need them to get behind it and be enthusiastic, because we'll have hiccups, we will.
It's everything, something's gonna go wrong, it's just a question of how badly. Like, that's just sort of, I feel like when I get like people right out of college who are working in marketing, they're like, oh no, this happened. And I'm like, something always goes wrong. It always goes wrong. Can we fix it right now? Yep, then it's not a problem. We move on. Is it going to take? Is it going to sort of screw up big term? Like then we'll get more people to help and it will be solved.
And I think where we are now in the state of the industry, we've come from, the disruption has happened in the sense of the awareness, the ripple is out there that there's an alternative medium now, right? That wasn't there before. Now it's about individual decisions and these individual battles on whether or not, how much and how fast you're going to commit to it. Some people think it's coming, I just don't have to commit to it yet. Cool, but they know it's coming and they know at some point they'll have to make a commitment. Some people where innovation is part of their DNA, a lot of their clients are like, well, innovation is part of our DNA, so it's got to be part of our mix now, and it's immediate. And then the fights that you have for the sense of immediacy is, well, how immediate do you need it to be? And that's where the fight of the dollars come in. Is it immediate enough for $1 million spend? Is the ROI or is the return going to be that much? Or is this something that we can mitigate a little bit through testing over a longer calendar? But I think, you know, the fight's still out there. It's just in different places now. It's not the big war it once was, but everyone in this room is going to be fighting for dollars to make any of these ideas get paid for by someone else.
And I think people tend to think that AR is just Snapchat. Sorry.
Yes.
That's okay.
But they think it's just one thing. It's just GPS. It's just Pokemon. It's just this. And so having people like Charlie and other people in the industry showcasing what else is out there. I have a Facebook group that now I think we're on 2,100 people in it now that's focused on VR, AR, and MR marketing and branding. So if you want to know what's out there, I just bombard people with articles. So don't have it hit your phone every time it's out there. But I think it's good for everybody to sort of know who they're competing against, know what's out there so we can push it forward, especially if some of the decision makers are going, well, they already did that, we can't do that now. At least you know what's available.
Yeah, at Octagon, our whole process changed once we started doing more in-house demos of projects that we've launched. And that's what intrigues me about your teach and learn, because I assume it's probably a little similar to that. But yeah, as soon as you get people's hands on it, it's much, much easier to just show them the capabilities of it. And then kind of answering your question from earlier, we have a lot of client teams just like 30 feet away at different desks. So a lot of business problems come up like at the coffee machine. But when that happens, you can really identify the problem that you have to solve, and we can go back and say, well, these are our solutions. So it's not so much like, here's why you need to give us this money. It's more like, here's the solution, there's alternatives, but if you want to go with ours, this is why it's the best. And I think having those conversations, you get to really, I think on an innovation team, you have to be a bit of a chameleon for different brands and different clients. You have to identify what character archetype you need to play to respond best to them. So in some cases, we need to be a disruptor. In some cases, we need to be a helper. In some cases, we need to be like a shoulder to cry on if their process is so wrong. So really identifying that and just having those conversations, and then also just getting their hands on tech, combination of all that, they're good to go as far as selling them in a project.
Any other? There's one way over there, DJ. I think they need to have it for recording purposes more than anything.
I'm coming.
So first of all, good to know that you have a Facebook group. I'd love to join it. But coming from a marketing side, I was wondering, how did you all find yourselves at the crossroad of marketing and using this technology? And also for the brands that do work with you, do you see them kind of coming back to you for more activations, or is it usually one-offs? And how do you prove effectiveness? Because I'm guessing there isn't like one universal way of showing that success. And sure, like awards show that it's interesting work, but does it actually move the needle?
Take a stab at that one first.
Okay.
So your first question, so I'll start with the second one actually. So as far as moving the needle, I know we've kind of weakened the word viral just because of social media, but a lot of our projects, as far as if clients come back to us or not, it's because of the virality of the success. So we have offices all over the globe, and for some of our projects, like the golf one, everyone heard about it. So suddenly clients are interested, they're calling us up, they're saying we need to do something similar, we have similar challenges, how can your team, even if it's not related to the product at all, how can your team approach this problem like you did that one? So I think the virality of it, and not necessarily like social media, people posting about it, but the virality of the impact and the spectacle of it all is a big seller for us. And then the first question, what was the first question?
It's how you get started.
Oh, yes, the easy one. So I think innovation, more than a lot of other business processes, is a mindset. And that sounds Hallmark cardy, but I think you kind of fall into it just because of a combination of envy and restlessness and needing to move the needle and just having that feeling of I need to shake something up because I want to. And just seeing deficiencies in people who are playing it safe, and you don't want to be a part of that. So I think that's how I've stumbled into where I am now.
The other thing to, for me, I watched the 360 video at Tribeca and when I can give creative feedback on this. Like, I know I couldn't do it, but I knew that based on my experience in television, that I knew how to do the creative brief and I knew how to just make it a little bit better because I was starting to already be like, oh, that's a little too long or whatever in my head. So I started that, and then I ended up just trying out more and more and more, and then started the Facebook group, and then got reached out to by a woman who ended up eventually being my co-author for a book called Marketing New Realities, which is directed towards marketers on how to use AR and VR. And that's sort of, that's what started me, and then started my own company, and then partnered with 2 other women to start a larger company.
I just want to add one thing that I think everyone in this room probably has this characteristic, but everyone on my team and I are just relentlessly curious. So if you have a really cool, like, part of the things that clients have grown to expect from us is we'll see something cool, we'll say, this is really cool, we don't know what to do with it, but we really, really love this. Can we do something with you? And then it's getting them to kind of embrace that. So that gets to, like, you need to really infuse the entire organization with that curiosity and be just relentlessly like, oh, I love that. What can I do with it? We might not do something with it tomorrow, but we store it, right? And we say, oh, I saw this one thing one time. Do you think that's right now to marry those 2 up? And if we can get that out into the organization through education, through getting their hands on things, the better likelihood we have for the uptake on that, which we saw that with VR in our organization. 5 years ago, we had to constantly sell it really hard.
Well, if you do it, that's the thing. Is
Yeah.
that a lot of times you have to be like, have you tried it? Here, try this. Because then you start going, oh my goodness, like
It's
all these
so
things we
cool.
could do.
Yeah.
And then when you start talking about it as if it's your own memory, then you go, wait, if we did it for a brand experience, then that would be even better.
Absolutely.
What about you in starting?
Starting, I was telling this, I was in a meeting with her agency years ago, and Pepsi, and we had an immersion, and that's how I first came across AR and VR. And I think that's one tip that I would leave everyone here is there are innovation departments and agencies at brands who are literally looking for a room to be in full of people like this. And knowing your audience and building relationships with agencies and agency partners, and getting in a room with them and maybe not even pitching them, but just show and tell, this is what I'm doing. Does it hit the mark? I know you're looking for innovation. Let me show you something innovative. These are the people that move the information into the decision makers for campaigns, and that can turn a tech startup idea into a campaign tool or something even more valuable for a marketing mix. So I think having these 2 groups of people come together is really important. And if you find yourselves in more rooms with marketers, engage them and find ways to just get in front of them. And then proving success is first having an idea of what success means. Oftentimes in the past, people didn't know how to measure success of an AR or VR activation. And what you have to do now, people are more sophisticated, is find what that key metric is that you're trying to affect and base your success on affecting that metric. You'll find there's a lot of places that you can affect something, but find the place where you've got the heaviest impact and tell that narrative the most.
The one other thing to just add in terms of learning, in May there's a festival called the Augmented World Expo, and I'm making my dent on the industry because they said that they wanted to do a marketing track, so my company is helping curate the marketing track on that Wednesday. So if you're going to be there, there will be a marketing track at Augmented World Expo. I'm going to finally a little dent, just because, as I said, technologists tend to go marketing. I don't want to talk about it. So, but I think it's important for marketers and technologists to talk more often and learn more about what each is doing, because it really could be a partnership with these technologies in a way. I mean, the AR and VR really have superpowers for brands, and if there's a marketer that hasn't tried it, they need to, because then you start just like brain explodes with ideas of what to do for clients after you start playing with more and more of the tech. There's a
Last question, right?
yeah, I think so. Good.
Hold on.
Thanks a lot. It's been a great presentation. How do you balance the brand messaging with the fun and entertainment and figuring out how to do that? I'm sure the people on the brand side want to get their message across, and yet you also want to make it fun so that the user is enjoying it.
I think it's a collaboration between the two, but the collaboration comes on getting the brand message across. The key thing that AR or VR can do is make either the message clearer or more transparent and honest. And if you can do that to the brand message with your technology, that's when the synergy really can produce something that can be successful. So as cool as the technology is, in whatever shape it is, it has to amplify the brand narrative, especially if you want the brand to pay for it. You know, it's like, you got to tell my story.
NASCAR branding everywhere. I think
No,
it
no,
does,
no, it doesn't
it's
mean
like
that.
a sentiment. It is engagement. It is that it has to sort of feel like a brand experience, which that's why they need to be partnerships.
Yeah, every brand has a strategy where they have a strategy on how to use their iconography with their digital signage or just with their copy. They've got still photos that they want to use. They've got moving images that they want to use in the form of GIFs or short form videos or longer formats. There's a lot of different ways brands tell their narrative, and they're just looking for new ways to tell that narrative, and that's what this room can present them. A better, or maybe not a better, but a different way. And in the future, a much more valuable way of telling their narrative.
All right.
Thank you to our panel today.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Guys.